Go. Hi everyone, Yvonne Heath here, Love Your Life to Death, and I am celebrating National Grief Awareness Day. I say celebrating because I am celebrating the fact that we're having these conversations that we need to have, don't we? And I am joined today, yes, by someone who agrees with me with all her heart and soul, my beautiful, amazing friend. I'm so glad we've connected. This is Laurel Gillespie. Laurel is the Director for Advanced Care Planning Canada, and so much more. So welcome, Laurel. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for asking, Yvonne. And thanks for the opportunity to come and share our thoughts and ideas with others who may be just learning about grief for the very first time.
Well, that's not a conversation. Yes, I mean, people don't talk about this stuff. And what I love about you and your journey and your passion, Laurel, you unapologetically and openly talk about your own personal journey with grief. And I have no doubt that that changed the trajectory of your life into creating something good and positive and changing the conversations about grief, because maybe you didn't have them growing up or whatever, you know. So talk a bit about your own journey with grief and how that led to what you're doing today.
Oh, thanks, Yvonne. So I guess that makes me think I have a few examples of experiencing grief over my lifetime. And one of my first experiences with it was always, for me anyway, it was losing a pet at a young age as a child. And that was kind of my first experience, but also there was an underlying tone of grief and the grieving process in the house that I grew up in as the youngest of 8 children. So when I was about 2.5, I lost a brother who was 17 years old at the time. And so he was the third oldest, so number 3, and I was number 8. So at 2.5, I really wasn't aware very much. But what I can tell you is that when he died in 1971, it would have been, my siblings were, you know, I mean, there's an 17, 18 year span between me and the oldest ones. There wasn't any grief counseling for them as they were adolescents. They were young adults. They were going through, you know, various stages, and they had not really a lot of opportunity. You know, that the church community might have offered some form, but they were children and you weren't supposed to talk about this stuff. It was painful and taboo. And you know, I can tell you that although his death impacted me from a sense of loss that I didn't have a brother that I should have had, the way that it impacted my siblings was far more traumatic than myself, of course. But those residual, I guess, impacts of not having addressed grief and such tremendous loss at such a vulnerable age has had lasting impact on them. From a personal perspective, I think my aha moment and how it led me to where I am today is at 38, when my twins were 9 and my youngest was 6, I was diagnosed with triple negative breast cancer. And so, you know, I had to have double mastectomy and chemo and radiation and, you know, all the while being a military wife and not having family close by. And it really opened my eyes to taking a lot of things into consideration that I had always taken for granted. You know, the simple things, and being such a young age, there was a lot of mixed emotions. And I think one of the things that surprised me the most about grieving and loss, and in a very personal, internal way, not having experienced an external loss, but the grief manifests itself in so many different ways, from tummy aches to headaches to you just don't feel well. It's not just about the tears that fall down your cheeks repeatedly for hours, or the puffy eyes and the drippy nose. There are other physiological and psychological impacts of not dealing with grief. And my job as Director of Advanced Care Planning is to help people plan ahead a little bit, not only for themselves, when they're not able to speak for themselves one day if they do get ill, or when they become ill and are not able to speak for themselves, is my role and my job is to try to help ease the pain for not only the patient, but the families and loved ones that are being left behind. Because when a death is as well planned as it can be a very beautiful process, and eliminate some of the anxiety and grief in the end for those that you leave behind.
Oh my goodness, there's so much to unpack there. Thank you. But you have brought up such critical, important points. There are people that think, oh, something happened a long time ago, it doesn't affect me now. You know, you just kind of have to get over it. And we both know that when grief, loss, crisis, whatever that is, a death, when that happens, you don't get over it, you build your new life around it, right? You don't just get over this one day. And the fact that grief manifests itself in so many different ways. One woman told me that her son who died by suicide, she didn't cry, and everyone thought that, oh my goodness, she's not processing because she was not crying. She said, but I couldn't get off the couch and my hair was falling out, and I just grieved in different ways. And it's more challenging to recognize that, but we do all grieve in different ways. And the other beautiful part, the beautiful part, and there's grief and then there's joy, and what you've done is taken your experience, your deep personal grief, and I know there's so much more to your story as well, and you've created something positive from it. And I know with advanced care planning and helping people navigate that, you bring so much love and compassion to the table, Laurel. And that's what I just love so much about you, because you care so deeply and you want to make a difference, and you are making a difference. And that's extraordinary.
Well, thanks, Yvonne. And it's because of people like you too that are helping to give people the resources and the tools to understand that grief is a lifelong process. Mm-hmm. It's a lifelong process. It doesn't just one day, you just don't stop grieving the loss of something that you cherished or that was something really important. It's a process, mm-hmm. right? And it never really does go away. And it, you know, it could be lots of buckets and buckets and buckets of tears in the beginning. There's always going to be a sense of sorrow and loss for some things, and it does get better, but it never really goes away. And it's learning how to cope and understand and to recognize that that's what it is, and say, you know what, it's okay. I'm allowed to feel this way, and there's nothing wrong with that. And then just be able to accept it and move on. But thank you for sharing your knowledge and your background for people to help better cope and manage their grief, right? Because it really is, it comes down to managing it and how you process it.
Yeah, and thank you for that. Like my deep belief and what I want to bring to the world is, we need many people having these conversations. We need to share different perspectives. We need to share all of our stories and our resources. We need to celebrate the joyful times in life and grieve wholeheartedly the sadness. I'm more concerned, you know, when people aren't grieving or just being a mess, is like, really, you're not a mess? Especially like today in global grief. This is what we are experiencing: global grief, loss, transitions, change. You, in any heartache, you experience grief. And my goodness, we have grief everywhere, and we have the opportunity to do grief better. How? By having honest conversations, right?
Exactly. And just acknowledging it and saying, you know what? Yeah, it's a thing. It's a real thing. And you can feel it. You can identify it. But identifying it, some people don't recognize if they're feeling, you know, more easily agitated or upset or on edge, or, you know, it could be that it's just, you know, sense of loss that they're experiencing, or all the many, many changes that we've had to experience in a short period of time, but also it's the unknown, right?
Absolutely. And when we talk about the fact that grief manifests itself in different ways, people say, well, how do I recognize it? And I believe that one key way is someone just not themselves, right? If someone is usually a very quiet person and they're still quiet, that doesn't seem like a red flag. You know, if they're like agitated by everything and angry, and, you know, isn't it just so lovely to just show up and just say, you don't seem to be yourself. Is everything okay? Are you okay today? Right? Like, or someone like me, if I'm being quiet, oh my goodness, something must be wrong, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
If someone is different, or, you know, like just ask.
It's like, yeah, or it's like trying to, like, recognizing that their inner spirit, their inner joy is missing. They're just, something's just not quite right. And if they normally have that bright interior spark, and it seems to have fizzled out, or they've stopped doing the things, stop meeting you at the yoga class once a week, or sometimes you just got to go take them by the hand and say, no,
yeah,
come on, we just keep showing up.
Keep showing up and asking, and when people say, well, it's kind of uncomfortable, it's like, yes, it is. Grief and sadness, yeah, it can be uncomfortable. Just show up anyway. And I can't end this conversation without saying how important I am, so passionate as you are, of course, about advanced care planning, because when we have these conversations, end of life planning should not happen at end of life. And if we do our advanced care planning, have these meaningful conversations before, when someone dies, we can get to grieving and supporting one another instead of trying to crack codes and fracturing families beyond repair, because everybody has a different idea.
Mm-hmm,
You can eliminate that excessive suffering. You make such a difference, and the resources are free and they're invaluable. And I just implore everybody and encourage to reach out and learn. There's beautiful resources.
Yeah, advancedcareplanning.ca. They're free, they're downloadable, and we call them workbooks. I'd like to see them be called handbooks, because it really is, it's a way of assisting you through a process of planning to have someone speak for you when you're not able to speak for yourself one day. Yeah. And to me, when I was going through my own illness, it really made me stop and shed some light on, what is important to me, and what are those things that bring me joy and bring value to my life, and what I want my ultimate death to look like. And I think the biggest thing was, I wasn't so much worried about the dying process or the loss of my own life. It was what I was going to leave behind. That they were going to be, my kids were going to be okay, and my partner was going to be okay, and that process of advanced care planning helps to eliminate some of the stress and the concerns that you might have, especially when you've been diagnosed with a terminal illness. That's not ideally the time when you want to be thinking about these things, but even if it is, that's the point that you find yourself at. It's not too late, and Absolutely. It's a really thing to go through that process.
Yes.
Of reading your advanced care planning handbook, if you will, to document it.
I share my 7 takeaways. Number 1, the best time to talk about, plan, and prepare for grief, death, and dying is when we are young and healthy. And the next best time is now. Not when you're seen, you don't have to wait till you're a certain age. Now, let's embrace life. Let's prepare for grief. Let's prepare for end of life, and just get to the busyness of living life to the fullest. Isn't that wonderful advice?
With joy.
Exactly. Laurel, I cannot thank you enough for being such a shining light and helping people with advanced care planning. I encourage everyone, go to advancedcareplanning.ca. There's wonderful resources there. Have a look before you need to. Have a look. Make it, give yourself a deadline, pun intended, to look at these resources. And thank you so much. And I'll say, happy National Grief Awareness Day. Thanks again, Laurel.
Thank you, Yvonne. And thanks for doing this for the National Grief Day. That's awesome.
Yes. Okay. Bye for now.
Bye.